Hi, I'm Leisha Gerbinski, and this is Blue Sky. Today we're talking about conspiracy theories that our Premier, Scott Moe, says he's getting emails about, and so he's looking into them. Recently, a video emerged of Premier Scott Moe at a town hall in rural Saskatchewan, and he was asked a variety of questions, including about chemtrails and what he's doing about poison raining down on this province. So now the question is, how should Premier Scott Moe have answered those questions? What role do we need our leaders to take when it comes to conspiracy theories? Is it different than the approach we might take with a sister or a cousin who's gone down the rabbit hole on things like vaccines, QAnon, or chemtrails? You can call us with your thoughts today at 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. But first, here's Ethan Williams with the CBC News.
Thank you, Leisha. Good afternoon. It's been a rough spring on city buses in Saskatoon. Police responded to 4 violent incidents last month alone. There were stabbings and assaults that sent passengers to hospital. Now, Saskatoon Transit is taking measures to keep its customers and frontline employees safe. It's increasing security at the downtown, Confederation Mall, and Market Mall transit terminals. It's also adding more supervisors on ride-alongs to increase the uniformed presence on buses, deploying Saskatoon's fire community support team to high-risk bus terminals and routes is also under consideration. Regina police say a 5-year-old is hurt after getting hit by a car in the Argyle Park neighborhood. It happened yesterday afternoon on Davin Crescent. The driver stayed at the scene, and police say the child was taken to hospital. Their injuries are not considered life-threatening. No word yet on if any charges will be laid. And a man from Alberta, the Alberta side, of Lloydminster, is dead after a crash north of the city earlier this week. RCMP say it happened just before noon Tuesday. A truck and semi collided on Highway 17. The driver of the truck died at the scene. Police say the semi driver was assessed by paramedics but didn't elaborate on their condition. No word yet on the cause of the crash. The Saskatchewan Roughriders and SGI are teaming up to tackle impaired driving. Under the new partnership, a fan at every rider's home game who has a safe ride home will get highlighted. Some of those options include having a designated driver or taking the bus, a ride share, or a cab. Dustin Duncan is minister responsible for SGI. He says the Crown Corporation has been working hard to lower the impaired driving rates in Saskatchewan, but that job is never over.
Now is not the time to say that we have a victory in this. We need to continue to drive those numbers down, and this is just one more initiative that we can do, partnering with the Saskatchewan Roughriders to see people plan a safe ride home before they even show up at Mosaic.
Duncan says many fans travel into Regina for rider games, and he stressed it's important they plan ahead to get home safely. At 12:02, it is mostly cloudy and 16 in Regina, also mostly cloudy in Saskatoon, where it's 18. This is CBC News. Work on a major water pipe in Calgary has stalled due to 2 injuries being reported at the repair site. The pipe began leaking nearly a week ago, forcing Calgarians to conserve water. Erin Collins has the latest.
2 people were injured on site overnight.
Jody Gondek says those injuries aren't critical, but Calgary's mayor says it will delay repairs to a major water main. Crews have been working around the clock for a week to repair the massive pipe. And while the work continues, Calgarians have been asked to curb their water use. Now, Gondek says they need to do more.
This morning, we are at a place where we don't have enough of a cushion for emergencies. Those emergencies include use in hospitals and in firefighting.
Since the feeder main failed last week, outdoor water use has been banned in the city. Residents are being asked to shorten showers and limit loads of laundry and dishes, too. Those restrictions are likely to continue well into next week. Repair work is expected to resume later today. Erin Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Police in Quebec have arrested 4 men in connection with a massive data breach at the Desjardins Financial Group. In 2019, the personal information of almost 10 million clients was stolen and in some cases used to access almost $9 million from clients' accounts. Benoit Richard is a spokesperson for the CERT du Québec.
This morning, our investigators made 4 arrests in various Quebec regions. The suspects are currently being interviewed by investigators and will appear by the end of the day at the Quebec City Courthouse via video conferencing. The charges include fraud, identity theft, and trafficking in identity information.
Richard says arrest warrants have been issued for 4 more people. Those that are not recently in police custody. Saskatchewan's first ever 5G innovation labs are now up and running. The labs in Regina and Saskatoon are run by SaskTel, Innovation Saskatchewan, and Samsung Canada. The goal is to help local businesses, university students, and researchers unlock the full potential of 5G technology. Stephen Viktorski is head of networks at Samsung Canada. He says 5G technology can help some of Saskatchewan's biggest industries.
You've got amazing industries there with agriculture and oil and gas, and there's so much potential in the province when you get great engineers and innovative companies, and you give them an environment where who knows what they could come out with.
Viktorski says more of these labs will help increase data transfer capabilities and create more secure networks. It will also help develop faster technologies for companies to test products and do research. And a new camp for queer youth is starting up in Saskatchewan. Applications are now open for Kaleidoscope Youth Camp, which will be held in July in Regina. It comes after Camp Firefly, a former LGBTQ+ camp in the province, had its funding cut, and it's unclear when or if it will return. Regina teacher Brendan Dickey is behind Kaleidoscope. Dickey says the passing of the Parents' Bill of Rights last fall has made things tough for queer kids.
I think since the passing of Bill 137, it seems like a lot of kids that were previously out are not really out anymore, whether it's just at school or if it's at home and school. And I feel like it's created a lot of difficulty for teachers and even trying to provide space for those same kids because we just want everyone to feel like themselves.
Dickey says he is already hearing from lots of parents of queer youth who are excited for their kids to attend. And Leisha, that's the news at 12 o'clock.
Ethan, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Ethan Williams. Let's go now to Tyreek Reed for the weather today. Hello, Ty.
Hi, Leisha. Yes, so we woke up to a lot of cloudy skies in south and central Saskatchewan. Quite the change from yesterday, a lot of this cloud cover being a result of low pressure that's going to be bringing scattered showers to these regions. In central Saskatchewan, like Saskatoon, the Battlefords, and Prince Albert, that's where we're going to see the potential for these showers to turn into thunderstorms later on this afternoon and into the evening. And of course, with this low pressure, we are once again going to have to put up with these strong winds, which have been the case for quite some time now. So I don't think this is a surprise anymore. So we are expecting gusts near 50 kilometers an hour in areas like Regina, Moose Jaw, Swift Current, and mainly southern areas. Still seeing the potential for those gusts to reach 40 in central areas where we could see those thunderstorms pop up. Up in the north is where we are going to see a lot more settled weather today in areas like Collins Bay and Uranium City. We are expecting much clearer skies, so folks there will be in for some sunshine throughout the day. Temperatures throughout the province are at seasonal in some areas, mainly in the south, where we can expect highs around 22 degrees throughout the region. But as we begin to head into the central, Churchill, and northern regions, that's where we begin to fall below that seasonal mark. We're looking at highs around 17 degrees in Buffalo Narrows and La Ronge, and around 19 in central areas like Saskatoon and the Battlefords. And of course, we want to be around 22 for this time of year. But as you know, this weather is up and down, and tomorrow it's going to be up, so we can expect higher temperatures, even closer to 30 in a lot of areas down in south and central Saskatchewan, Leisha.
That is a change. Closer to 30?
Yes, closer to 30. You know,
That's
we
a
are
shift.
only 1 week away from summer, Leisha. So,
Oh, well, bring it on.
Bring it on for sure.
Ty, thank you.
No problem.
That is Tyreek Reed bringing us today's weather forecast. Well, right now in Regina, we're sitting at 17. Saskatoon is 19 degrees.
Hi, I'm Andrew Wabat. This is Blue Sky with Leisha Grubinski. We are broadcasting from the traditional territories of the Dene, Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and homeland of the Métis.
Okay, so has anyone said the following things to you? Chemtrails are being used for nefarious reasons. 15-minute cities are ways for governments to control populations. and vaccines contain microchips to track people. Stop me if you have heard these theories before. Conspiracy theories are not new. Think flat earthers and people who believe the moon landing was faked. But what happens when these theories get attention from elected leaders? It's something that is concerning politicians in this province.
As soon as they hear one angry respondent or a town hall participant, talk about chemtrails or conspiracy theorists involving your healthcare workers, you fold like a cheap tent. That's not leadership.
So today on the show, we're going to be joined by two people who study conspiracy theories. One looks at some of the theories that have taken hold in Canada over the years, and the other looks at some of the theories that are circulating today and what that could mean for future elections. We'll also learn about how you can talk to a loved one who's fallen down an internet rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. What's been your experience? You can call us now, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. And just a note that we are streaming live on YouTube today, so you can find us at CBC Saskatchewan. Recently, this video emerged of Premier Scott Moe speaking at a town hall in rural Saskatchewan, and he was asked a variety of questions, including questions about chemtrails and what he's doing about poison raining down on this province.
What are you going to do about the barium, aluminum, strontium, lithium, atrazine, raw kerosene, raw gasoline, and raw diesel that's being dumped on your province by God knows who?
I believe he's talking about the chemtrails.
Do you have anybody doing soil tests and water tests for all of these chemical poisons being dumped on our heads?
There's a lot of soil tests going on. I don't know if they're looking for all of that or not. I'm starting to hear about this through emails into our office the last number of months, and I'll have to do some more work looking into it. I don't know if there's as coordinated an approach as some folks think, but there obviously are emissions that are coming out of the jets that are flying over, and the prospect is, or the projection is, there's going to be a lot more jets flying in the not too distant future than there is today.
That is Premier Scott Moe responding to a question about chemtrails at a town hall in the town of Spears, east of the Battlefords, about 6 weeks ago. Video of that town hall was recently posted online. The Premier says more and more people are asking about this. This Week Morning Edition host Stephanie Langenegger spoke with David Keith about how politicians should respond to this type of conspiracy theory. David Keith is a physicist and professor in the Department of Geophysical Sciences at the University of Chicago. He has been a target of chemtrail conspiracists for years. Stephanie started by asking him for his response to the theories being spouted at the town hall.
A lot of it. We've actually done some polling results that suggest that some significant fraction of Canadian and Americans, like 10 or 20%, believe that their government is somehow part of a conspiracy that is using commercial aircraft to spray some kind of toxins where the purported purpose might be mind control or mass murder or who knows what. So this conspiracy theory is out there for sure, and the question is why, and the question is why the Premier responded the way he did.
Why is this out there, do you think?
Really hard to tell. I'm an expert on atmospheric science and on some related idea called geoengineering, but I'm not an expert on why people believe conspiracy theories. It's clear that people believe a large number of them, from the idea that 9/11 was an inside job to the idea that there's aliens on some Air Force base in the U.S. I'm not the right person to speculate on why people believe them, but I think there are clear answers that politicians and other senior people ought to give.
What should the Premier have said to that question?
I think you need to find respectful ways that pick up on the fact that people really are asking questions that really concern them, but also are clear that we're not just going to look into something where there's no evidence whatsoever. So, we could look into whether the moon actually has green cheese in the middle of it. We could look into whether Prime Minister Trudeau actually is an alien from some foreign planet. But the answer is it's just not credible to do that. There's no evidence whatsoever for this kind of thing to be true. You'd have to have a kind of conspiracy of lies at a level that there's just no precedent for. It makes no sense.
What does your expertise tell us about what science can do with the atmosphere?
Science can do all sorts of things with the atmosphere. I think you're talking about contrails here. There have been contrails have been observed and studied in detail since the beginning of the jet age. And it's absolutely true that there are some contrails that are persistent for more than a day. And there's been a huge amount of science on that with all sorts of open science publications from around the world for many, many decades. So it's a thing we understand pretty well. It's, of course, absolutely true that aircraft cause pollution, and they do even emit some unburned hydrocarbons and unburned aviation kerosene, jet fuel. So that's all correct. But it's essentially inconceivable that there's some secret program to put highly toxic extra material inside jet fuel. And the reason to believe that is not because I'm saying it and not because we have a test that proves it's not true, because you can't really prove a negative. The reason to say it is to think, how could it make any sense? And how could you ever keep such a thing a secret? Because to do that in a commercial aircraft, are fueled and managed at normal airports where there's an open environment. People have cell phones. If there was some conspiracy where people were loading poisons, it would be easy to expose.
How do you respond to people who question you on this?
I ask them why they believe it. I try and understand where they're coming from. So I don't just say you're wrong in a simple way. I ask them why and try and draw out and try and get them to explain the conspiracy and the reasons for it. And sometimes, at least, I have had experience of people changing their views. To be clear, I listened to the clip that Scott Moe said, and he didn't agree there was a conspiracy, but he said he'd heard things for months and they were looking into it. And I think it's possible to do better than that. It's possible to find polite ways to say that it's just really inconceivable that there is such a large-scale program.
David Keith is a physicist and professor in the Department of the Geophysical Sciences at the University of Chicago. He was speaking with Morning Edition host Stephanie Langenegger. You can hear the rest of that interview using the CBC Listen app, and it's also posted to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube page. That is where we are streaming live right now. Now, David Keith isn't the only one who takes issue with how the Premier handled these questions. NDP leader Carla Beck held a news conference yesterday to address what she called a lack of leadership for leaving conspiracy theories open to debate. Theories that included questions about Saskatchewan healthcare workers being involved in a pandemic conspiracy. Here is Carla Beck speaking with reporters.
I understand that those theories are out there, but as I've said before, as leaders, we have a responsibility to show leadership, to not, nod and smile when it's. Sometimes you just have to say, no, that's not a thing. That's not a thing that Saskatchewan healthcare workers or the SHA were involved in. That's fairly simple, but we didn't see the Premier do that.
So if you were just saying, I just to kind of follow the guy off, accuse him and not embarrass him in front of his peers, just saying, we'll look into it, you don't think that would be appropriate?
No, I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, that leaves space for the possibility, unless the Premier thinks that was the case, which I mean, of all of the things that the Premier and government should be looking into right now, I've mentioned a few, but the list goes on. Affordability, healthcare, actually sitting down with healthcare workers. Remember, this is a government that has refused to convene a nursing or a healthcare task force to sit down and hear from healthcare workers about what the issues are, but also where some of the solutions might be. But instead, he spends 2 hours entertaining conspiracy theories that put healthcare workers, put public health officials at the center of some conspiracy. I don't see why it would have been difficult for the Premier to say, you know what, that's not something that we're looking into. That's not something that we believe is true. We know that that's not something healthcare workers would do. But we didn't see it. If you can't do what's right in the small moments, you can listen to people. You can be clear about where you don't agree with them. Suggesting that this is something you're going to have your officials looking into and sort of further escalating that, I don't think is the way to do it. We live in a highly polarized world right now where there are all sorts of conspiracy theories and all sorts of invitations for people to believe the worst about healthcare workers, about governments. I think it's incumbent, it's on all of us to show leadership. Say, even when it's hard, you know what, I disagree with you. That is not something that our healthcare workers in this province or our public health officials were involved in. I know that for a fact. The Premier should know that for a fact.
That is NDP leader Carla Beck. I'm Leisha Grabinski. You are listening to Blue Sky. Today we're looking at the prevalence of conspiracy theories. I want to share with you an email we just got from Keith who says, this conspiracy epidemic is a serious issue. I know many people who have bought into these conspiracies at different levels, and all of them have damaged or destroyed relationships with families and friends. Leaders that believe or condone this nonsense makes the problem worse. You can email to bluesky@cbc.ca, or you can join the conversation by calling 1-800-716-2221. So today we are looking at the prevalence of conspiracy theories, the conditions under which they take hold and spread, and the role of leaders in perpetuating and giving fuel to these theories. So we have two guests with us today. One has studied how some conspiracy theories took hold in Canada in the past and what lessons we can learn from those experiences. Daniel R. Meister is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of New Brunswick. He recently co-wrote an article for the Walrus magazine titled How Three Big Conspiracy Theories Took Root in Canada. Daniel, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thanks for having me.
And our other guest has looked into current conspiracy theories and tries to understand the roots of them. Carmen Celestini is a postdoctoral fellow at Queen's University School of Religion, focusing on disinformation and online extremism. Carmen, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you.
This is going to be a great conversation. Carmen, I want to start with you because you've been hearing it all so far. What are your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
I think that these conspiracy theories are not unique, but what is unique is the sociological atmosphere or environment that we're in right now coming out of COVID. And when we think about when people are afraid, they start looking for answers for what is causing this fear or what is causing this sort of sense of perpetual disaster that's happening for them. And in the past, when we think about conspiracy theories, even if we think back to like the Goldwater election and the John Birch Society, politicians and leaders tended to dismiss them. And they would go after one individual, but would still want to look at their political base to be able to have that vote. But now we see universally across the globe politicians using these conspiracy theories and moral panics that are attached to them to rile up their base and to get elected. And so we really are at this crux of this moment where we need to decide, which way we want to go. We can see right-wing politicians rising across Europe. We see it here in North America as well. Populism is really important, and conspiracy theories are an amazing mobilization tool for that to occur.
So maybe give me an example, a tangible example of politicians using something as a moral panic to rile up their base. What's an example that you can think of right now?
Right now, if we think about a conspiracy theory called the Great Reset, which is attached to the World Economic Forum. So we can see politicians globally saying we will not be involved with Davos, or we won't be involved with the World Economic Forum. That conspiracy theory actually came from a video where economists were trying to predict what was going to happen in the year 2030. It was released in 2016, put online on the World Economic Forum's Twitter account, and was shortly taken down. But when COVID happened, Prince Charles, now King Charles, used the words the Great Reset to talk about what could happen during COVID and what could happen during the climate crisis that we're facing. And people started researching that, and it became attached to this idea because in the video, it says you will own nothing and you will be happy. There won't be one world power. There will be international, like America being a world power, Russia being a world power. There will be a conglomerate of nations that are together. So it linked to this one world idea of government and the enslavement of people. And then our own prime minister used it during COVID as well, which linked him to this as well. and Christina Freeland has been involved in the World Economic Forum. So now with the convoys, there is this idea that if Canada fell, Australia fell, and New Zealand fell, the rest of the world would fall to the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. That's why in Australia and in New Zealand, they were carrying the Canadian flag at their protests, because Canada was the first one pushing this notion. So now we see politicians constantly talking about the World Economic Forum. Even here in Canada, our politicians say, and if we are elected, we will not have any connection to the World Economic Forum, both provincially and federally.
And what are the consequences of how this is all taken hold by so many leaders, and how it's being talked about in online circles? Like, what's the consequence of this?
The consequences is that we have a rise of populism, a rise of right-wing governments globally. We have politicians who may not be talking about, very important topics about climate change, or talking about human rights, or talking about inclusivity. But what they're talking about is 15-minute cities and digital currency, and talking about the World Economic Forum. They're a voice for those who feel that they're voiceless, those who feel that they're disenfranchised from the government, those who feel that they distrust the institutions of society, academia. So now we have people who are coming together who have all of this trust, but now they have a very powerful voice and a pulpit. There's a lot of connections with religion and with politicians, mouthing these words that they feel that they are empowered and that they can change this terrible theory that they have is going to happen with the enslavement or the end of overpopulation or whatever their darkness may be. But one of the things about this is that at this moment that we're in right now is there's this convergence of conspiracy theories. So we see things that people who landed on thought the moon landing was fake, or people who were anti-vax before COVID didn't really have conversations. But now they're all interconnected, and it's hierarchical, and they're nested within each other. So there are code words or memes, or even images that can be shared online that push these narratives. And with that comes very extreme ideas. Extremists will share these memes among groups, and people on their phones will go, oh yeah, I'm mad at Justin Trudeau, so I agree with this, and share it. And meanwhile, it is something that's really horrible. The one example I use in my classrooms all the time is there's an image of Justin Trudeau, Christina Freeland, and Jagmeet Singh together, and it's a movie poster, and it says death of a nation. And people are like, oh yeah, I'm really mad at the Liberal government. They share it. But that movie poster mimics Birth of a Nation, which was the film that started the KKK. So when we share these things, extremists are using this with these anti-immigration ideas and these memes, and really sharing these ideas that are harming marginalized communities, harming women. And it's something that is spreading, and politicians are jumping upon this, and that can have a widespread effect. I mean, we see it with this potential the word of the groomer moral panic, what's happening with LGBTQ2SA communities, what's happening with women's rights, what's happening with people of color, immigration. It's not something that is just in Canada. We have to keep in mind that these ideas are spread on the internet, and the internet is borderless. And so too are these ideas and these moral panics and these conspiracy theories.
How does it take an average person by hold, though? Thinking about people who might be following a lot of wellness accounts, and then all of a sudden you're getting messages about q-anon, and how easily someone can get sucked in without realizing that they're now viewing things that are part of a conspiracy theory. Put me inside the head of somebody who's paying attention to this stuff kind of mindlessly, and then all of a sudden believes in a conspiracy theory.
It's not that hard to actually get there. So when we think about if people are afraid, so during COVID, or the fact that we have wars happening, or economic concerns, or just fears, they'll start Googling and looking up information. One of the ways that we interconnect is on forums, on social media. We start talking, there's conversations that are there. And some people, when they have this sense of overriding fear, even if we're talking about what was happening with the contrails and the airplanes. People fear technology. They fear change. They fear things that are happening that are out of their control. They fear loss of their own power, or if they didn't get where they thought they would be in the world, if they, aren't the most powerful person at the head of a corporation, it has to be someone's fault. They didn't get the inheritance they believed. And so what they can do is they'll start looking for answers about why that could happen. If the person is religious, they could turn to their deity or their God and ask for intervention. If that doesn't come through, they start looking for a human reason for this to happen. Now, this could be if you're a New Age person, if you're Catholic, Jewish, Islamic, any religion has these connections where you look for this intersection. When it doesn't happen, you start looking for human causes. These human causes can be provided on the internet quite readily. It could be it's big pharma. It could be that, the government is trying to control us and take away our rights, or it can be anything. And once we start having those conversations and those things can start making sense as to why everything seems so dire, the envelope can continuously open and people can link things together and they can interpret it to actually meet their own experiences and lived experiences and ideas and world understandings and world views. And it can start pushing this envelope where these conspiracy theories become the answer. It's not necessarily this far-fetched idea that we have about aliens taking over the world. It can be human made. And when people are looking for these ideas, there's a comfort in knowing that you know why all these bad things are happening. Suddenly now you are in control of what's happening around. You can also sense yourself as being what we call a social hero, which means people are going to denigrate you, or your friends are going to stop talking to you, or you're going to get fired for the things that you say. But because you know the truth and you are going to stop whatever your idea of what the Illuminati or the aliens or whatever is doing, then we can actually understand the world in a different way, and you will be this hero that people will worship. They'll say, warriors coming back from war who are heroic. You'll get that ticker tape parade, right? It gives you that sense of control and understanding of the world. But when we think about these conspiracies, what we really need to do is think below the salaciousness. I mean, we all sort of like to joke about tinfoil hats and alien people and all of these things. But what conspiracy theories actually articulate is a sense of injustice that the person feels. And that injustice could be that they're being attacked, or that they're not in this position, or their life or how they understand the world is changing. And those are the conversations that we should be having and our politicians should be having, rather than focusing on, are there contrails or are there lizard people?
That is very interesting. I want to ask you more about that feeling of that sense of injustice. So don't go anywhere, Carmen. We just need to take a minute to check in with the CBC's Ethan Williams, who has today's news headlines. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Alicia. Well, Saskatoon Transit says it is increasing security at several of its bus terminals. It comes after police responded to 4 violent incidents last month on city buses. Security will be increased at the downtown, Confederation Mall, and Market Mall transit terminals. Saskatoon Transit says it's also considering installing security cameras at 2 of those terminals and is developing a policy to ban problem customers. And a new camp for queer youth is starting up in Saskatchewan. Applications are now open for Kaleidoscope Youth Camp, which will be held in Regina in July. The camp organizer says he's already hearing from lots of parents of queer youth who are excited for their kids to attend. We're going to hear from him and have other stories and a look at the weather forecast coming up in your news at 1 o'clock.
All right, Ethan, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Ethan Williams. I'm Leisha Grabinski. This is Blue Sky. You've been hearing from Carmen Celestini, who's a postdoc fellow at Queen's University School of Religion, focusing on disinformation and online extremism. And in a moment, we'll be hearing from Daniel Meister, who's a postdoctoral fellow at the University of New Brunswick. Our topic today is all about the prevalence of conspiracy theories and really how leaders should respond. I mean, all of this was started because of a video that emerged of Premier Scott Moe speaking at a town hall. He was asked about chemtrails, and the official opposition is calling into question how Premier Scott Moe engaged with some of the questions. So we're going to tackle that in a bit. But first, I want to go to one of our callers who joins us right now, James in Saskatoon. Hi, James.
Hi. Yes. I just wanted to bring up an incident from the 80s where there was this thing that was debated in the House of Commons for a number of days or weeks, and it was called the Mickey Mouse acid scandal or problem. And the conspiracy theory was that somebody, probably hippies or anarchists, were taking the tattoo transfers from bubblegum and spiking them with LSD and giving them out to kids in schoolyards. And the ones that people were told to look out for were the transfers of the Mickey Mouse character from the Wizard or from the Sorcerer's Apprentice that had the sparkling wand and 13 stars around it. And this went on for a long time. And it was something that was not only in the House of Commons, but it was also in the Saskatchewan legislature, that we should have a more active approach to illicit drugs, and we should go in against certain groups of people. And I found it quite interesting that it's been going on since then, and it's been going on prior to that. I can remember as a child when you'd have people going from restaurant to restaurant or beer hall to beer hall in Saskatchewan in small communities and spreading rumors around. And pretty soon, and the thing was, you could start a rumor in one, and 3 weeks later it would come back to you, but it had been drastically changed. And that's how you told if it was fact or fiction. Because these conspiracy theories are living entities. They change, they develop, they can become more expanded as they go.
And of course, news is traveling faster these days because of social media, the internet.
Actually, if in rural Saskatchewan, if you look at the distance from small town to small town, you can go to for coffee in the morning in one town, go for coffee in the afternoon in another town, and go for a late night coffee in another town and spread the same rumor around.
True,
right?
true.
So that was our internet back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the beer halls and the coffee shops.
Yep.
Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
James, thank you. That's James joining us in Saskatoon. It's a pretty good segue to David Keith, who's, not David Keith, to Daniel Meister, the postdoctoral fellow at the University of New Brunswick, because he's looked at the history of three big conspiracy theories that took root in Canada, wrote about it for the Walrus magazine. Daniel, welcome to Blue Sky.
Yeah, thanks. It's great being here.
Yeah, so interesting to hear from James in Saskatoon about that historical example from the 80s. What does that, I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but what does that bring to mind for you as someone who's looked at the history of this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't familiar with this particular one, but I find it interesting that it's, there's a genuine issue there, right? There's concern about illegal drugs harming folks, and then there's, a pivot to placing the blame on a certain community. So they're saying this is the hippies' fault and this is what's going on. And again, it's, as Carmen talked about, it's a way of, rationalizing or trying to deal with these fears that people have, the larger, context around them. And then, what is interesting too is that one did make the House of Commons, as James is saying, because I think that's the piece that is different that Carmen was talking about is formerly some of the individuals I've studied, you see in their archives, their correspondence, there might have been a sympathetic politician who genuinely had concerns about an issue, and they would maybe write privately to a constituent who aired them or shared those concerns and seemed safe to talk with. But it was never, we were going to go out and campaign on this or try to use this, divisive conspiracy theory to recruit for the party and get votes. And that's a new phenomenon as far as I can tell.
Yeah. What else, though, from history do you think helps inform how we think about today? I am curious just to know more about what you've looked into when it comes to conspiracy theories in Canadian history.
Yeah. So one of the things, that was interesting is, I was setting out to study something completely different, and in the course of my research, discovered that one of these individuals who had a reputation for being, very tolerant and whatever, had a sort of darker side, or the secret history that they were really into these conspiracy theories and also like racism and eugenics and things like this. And one of the things that's interesting to know about the past that it's kind of continues into the present is that these things really kind of bubble to the surface when there are these larger international or kind of global issues going on. So, for example, in the Walrus article, I look at Watson Kirkconnell. He's a guy who, he has his own issues. He is not, he's found unfit for overseas service by the Canadian military. So that's the context of the First World War. So there's this global anxieties about what's happening with the world in this war. There's the personal issues that we're trying to deal with. And this is where he kind of first takes this dive into conspiracies around ideas about race and eugenics, and that there's conspiracies about immigration and the kind of people that are being let into Canada at this time. So we have that the larger kind of context and then the personal context. And also you see how an individual, it's kind of like a gateway in, if they believe one theory or they start to kind of go down this road of conspiracism, then all these other ones can attach on. And I think what Carmen's saying is absolutely right, that this happens to an unprecedented degree now because of the internet and the algorithm that are, will push you in directions you didn't even consider previously. But there definitely was that sense before. So, for instance, Kirkconnell, talking about the article, his kind of original conspiracy had to do with race and immigration, and then that moves along over time. So, he very famously comes up against fluoride, which is another like huge movement that's still, there's an anti-fluoride movement to this day, very organized. And also he gets dragged into a lot of, very unseemly, anti-Semitic theories and these organizations that are spreading. But again, it's a different phenomenon than today in the sense of the internet, so like a lot of this work was done very quietly and cautiously. You had Holocaust denial and things like this. So they were, really outlandish and harmful theories, but they were being passed, letter to letter, and someone would find someone that's safe to talk to. And now, someone makes a fake account, goes on the internet, you can consume all sorts of wild and really dangerous ideas, and you can also spread them much more easily. And for people that are seeking a sense of community now, if you don't have to physically go out to a meeting, or you don't have to subscribe to a magazine that, the post person is going to deliver to you, you can just go on the internet. Then there's, I think, perhaps even more of a willingness to get involved in these things because there's not maybe initially the social cost. In fact, there's this sense of belonging.
Right. So there's actually a few things that you mentioned there, that sense of community, and then that takes me back to what Carmen said about that sense of injustice. And we'll unpack those ideas, because I think what we really want to get at today is how to engage with people. And then the second part of that was how should political leaders engage with that. So we'll come back to those ideas in a moment. But we do have a couple of people on the line who want to join the conversation. So let's go to Maria in Swift Current. Hello, Maria.
Hello. Sorry, I was outside. I had to run to the phone. So some things I get concerned about is I feel this seems like a very anti-democratic conversation by saying just because people have certain thoughts, we shouldn't listen to them and easily dismiss them. And there was talk about, why would this happen? We can't prove that this theory isn't correct, but why would it happen? Well, it took a long time to get DDT off the market. Smoking used to be encouraged. There's so many examples of corporations and governments enacting policies that harm people as a whole. You even see sugar. We know it's highly addictive. We know addiction is a progressive disease, and we know sugar has absolutely no health benefits. But we give it to children and get them hooked and wire their brains for addiction. I think part of the conspiracy is we know something's wrong, but we're not quite putting our finger on it. So I think our brains are searching, and it's important to allow these searches, like, they say a good brainstorming web, throw out every idea, even the most ridiculous, because it helps get us thinking. And that is important for critical thinking, which I think people overestimate their ability to critical think, because, there's that, they warn throughout history the harms of self-righteousness, because when you think you're right, you're really shutting off your critical thinking process because you've already made the decision about right and wrong. And I think it's really dangerous. And so
I want to jump in, Maria, because I think you've brought up a few interesting things, and I want Carmen to respond. So, Maria, thank you for calling.
Yep.
Carmen, I wonder, well, just kind of in general, first off, how you might respond to Maria. And then there is something I want to pick up on, because she said we know something is wrong. And it just makes me think of a ton of examples in my own life of, whether that's people seeking out answers about menopause, or they're having fertility issues. And so you're trying to figure out, what is causing this thing to be wrong? And it can take you down a path. Who knows where it can take you when you start searching the internet. So I'm just wondering, Carmen, how you would respond to Maria.
Absolutely. I think that it is important that we have conversations and we ask questions. One of the things about conspiracy theories they are questions that people are uncomfortable about asking. And I think the converse to that is that we also have to think about, are we being transparent with things that are happening? I think that when we look at ideas about, sugar being unhealthy or smoking being unhealthy or those kind of things, these are very tangible things that, we can experiment with, that we can look at to see what the repercussions are. The idea that perhaps there are pedophilia elites who are running all of the universities in the world, who are trying to take people down through overpopulation with 5G chips that they're ingesting through COVID tests, are not something that's like what the person that was interviewed by the other hosts were talking about, that we can't prove a negative, right? We can look experimentally at, okay, people smoked, we started seeing this rise of lung cancer. So is there a correlation between these things? And then you can start developing a hypothesis and looking at it. Conversations are absolutely needed, but I think that the conversations have to look at, who are we blaming? So if we think that, it is a certain group that is causing whatever may be wrong, are we harming that group? What harm are we actually doing? Are we taking away their rights? Are we blaming them for something that can cause harm in a larger scale? And so when we think about these ideas, we have to think outside of the box of, this is the sense of injustice that I personally feel, or my own sense of discomfort about something, and look at it in a larger societal idea and try to understand what are the repercussions and what are the conversations that we're having. If we come to the table and, we name call, if I'm a left-wing person and I call a right-wing person, something like a terrible name, because that is a perceived stereotype that I have of them, and they come to the table thinking that I'm left-wing and attack me with a name, we're not having a conversation, right? We're having a defensive, where we're fighting against each other and trying to validate our situations. So I think that the conversations that are out there need to be critical thinking, but they have to be based on something that is realistic. Now, when we think about fertility, the things that you brought up, yeah, we can see that there are environmental harms that can affect fertility. There are environmental harms that we ingest that probably could harm our bodies. So those are the things that we need to investigate and look into. And, maybe there are some things that are new age medicines or homeopathic medicines that can help in those situations. But I think we have to approach it from a scientific position while still addressing the concerns that the individual has. I think in many ways we ignore people's concerns and we dismiss them because the way they articulate what it is or who they are blaming for it. But it still behooves all of us to look into that and understand it and try to be transparent and respond to those senses of injustice, whether real or perceived. And that can rebuild trust in society and our institutions.
Daniel, do you have thoughts you want to add? And I like that, real or perceived. But I will admit I have trouble maybe sometimes engaging. I don't know where to take the conversation, and sometimes there are things that I can't prove the other way. Like even talking about vaccines. Like I just sometimes don't feel like I have the tools to engage in these conversations. So I'm wondering what you're thinking about, Daniel, when it comes time to engage with people.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that struck me is, a caller is talking about this, asking these questions or not having questions that are off limits will help us and what they're thinking. But I mean, the other important consideration here is this going to lead to harm, right? If we're stigmatizing a particular group, or and as has already been mentioned, if we're asking questions and things that we can't necessarily disprove, or we reject any sort of a scientific framework for analyzing that, if we're getting an answer, then this can lead to all sorts of dangerous situations.
Okay, let's leave it there. We'll go to another caller. So Jack in Lumsden joins us right now. Hi, Jack.
I'll try and make this brief. When we're talking about real events rather than hypothetical situations and sources and, motivations, controls, etc., last summer in southern Saskatchewan, we had 2 months right from April, May, right through the summer, where we were choking on prevailing wind smokes from all the fires in Canada. It was the highest level of outbreak of fires all over the country on record. And I was talking to people that I think I know fairly well about what was going on later in the season when it started to abate. And I was talking about climate change and how we really have to get a handle on this in terms of where we're going in our environment and in our economics and our social systems. And they were saying to me, Well, there's so many sources and so many theories about causes that you really can't understand how this is happening and what's really going on. And I was so boggled by that response from people that were choking on the smoke for 2 months that I had to walk away. I could not have a conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up fires and things around climate change. Carmen, I want to ask you about that because, and it's interesting, like, what information people get, because I wasn't seeing anything firsthand, but then I was hearing that other people were talking about how fires had been intentionally set. Like, there were a ton of conspiracy theories around the fires, right, Carmen?
Oh, absolutely. There were a million conspiracy theories that were attached to them. Many of them that were attached to existing conspiracy theories, like QAnon ideas or ideas of infiltration from China trying to take over Canada, or that it was part of the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum trying to force us back into our homes to ensure that we would own nothing and be happy. So we attached these ideas to it. But fundamentally underneath that, I mean, people are concerned. Things are changing. Hurricanes, tornadoes. I mean, where I am right now, there is a tornado watch this afternoon. It's not something that normally happens here where I'm located, but because things are changing, that fear makes us feel uncomfortable, right? And if you are religious, in many religions, they say that, that your deity, your God, is giving you dominion over this land. There won't be harm to it anymore, right? So you start thinking, well, it's got to be humans that are doing these things. And if there's already a sense of distrust in science and academia and the government and corporations, then it's easy to start blaming them. Right? They're trying to get something from us. And so people will create a lot of conspiracy theories that are attached to it where they or their fellow humans are not the people who are the cause of climate change, but there are victims to people who are manipulating these things.
So again, bringing it back to the politicians, and I can barely remember how provincial politicians dealt with some of those conspiracy theories. You might remember better than me, but how are politicians dealing with that, and what role do leaders play in making sure people have the information they need? Or I mean, it's like getting back to Premier Scott Moe and saying that the government was going to look into it. I mean, were politicians entertaining what was happening with the fires? Like, how should leaders be dealing with this, Carmen?
These are conversations that they have to have. They have to say, we know that this is uncomfortable, that we're all under this, pile of smoke right now, but we need to understand why this is happening. And this is what science is telling us. We understand that there are concerns about these other issues, that it could be a part of that. But what we are finding, and being very transparent about the investigations and the science that's behind it, I think that when you dismiss people, I'm just going to harp back for a moment here, but I did my PhD on the John Birch Society and the Goldwater election and how they got him the nomination for the GOP. Everyone dismissed the John Birch Society, but their ideas and their conspiracy theories in 2024 are still taking hold. The idea of the war on Christmas comes from the John Birch Society. And when we look at scholarship and ideas about what was happening politically at that point, people dismiss them and made jokes. They still do. They just say, they're crackpots or they're conspiracy theorists. But it's important for us because these ideas keep returning. And it's important for our leaders to engage with it. Now, don't mock it or do anything like that because that validates their position. When we call them the fringe majority or the basket full of deplorables, they take that name onto themselves because it's powerful. It validates that they are heroes questioning these things. Politicians have to take it with seriousness and compassion. This is people's emotions and fears. It's not just people being angry about something that they can't control. There's something that they're afraid of or an injustice that they are trying to articulate underneath this salaciousness. So I think that we see some politicians really pushing this narrative of what are the concerns and the ramifications of oceans rising or forest fires or what's happening. But we also see other ones saying, well, this isn't as serious and it's a way to control you or to ensure to take away your freedoms or your rights. So we have to decide as a global community, as humanity, about what we want. Do we want to harm others? Do we want to empower others? And what do we want to engage with science, or do we want to engage with populism and people who just mouth these ideas?
Let's go to Lloyd, who joins us now in Broadview. Hey, Lloyd.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having this topic. It's very timely. We sure do need some direction in a lot of the conspiracy theories that are out there. And I don't go much on internet and things like this, but I would like to know, either you or your guests, how you could go about debunking and how you did. I heard early on when COVID was, I got to first preface it with, in our societies, we'd all agree that democracy is important and that people can express ideas and that we have, the truth out there. And I have always trusted the people who've gone to journalism school to look through all the, fluff or spin that comes off of politicians and companies and stuff like this. And so when I heard this theory, this conspiracy theory, I thought it can't be true that such a thing would happen on a worldwide scale. So I would like to know what your comment was. I heard early on in COVID that there was an organization or a number of news organizations got together in the English language world, I guess, and they were looking to guide people through the COVID thing, and I think they called it the Trusted News Initiative. And when I heard that, I just laughed out loud because I said, how could it be possible that the news organizations would get together to try and control the message? And so I've heard this before, and I always tell people, well, that's a conspiracy theory. There's no way that the news organizations would get together to try and control the message. And so, but there's still people talking. Yeah, there was a Trusted News Initiative. They're controlling what was being said. And I thought, well, maybe I heard the name wrong. But recently again, somebody said, well, there's a thing was called the Trusted News Initiative. I'd like you to tell me, is that really true? There was or there wasn't?
Well, I don't think so, Carmen. I'm going to let you take that because it comes up, and there is distrust in the media, and we could do a whole show just on that. But go ahead, Carmen.
Well, first I was going to say, you weren't invited to the Trusted News Group?
I guess not.
That's unfortunate. I think the CBC would be there. What we're seeing in the world right now is because of the internet. And, we've had it in the past as well. In the 50s and 60s, there were human events and magazines that came out that, like American Opinion and things that talked about conspiracy theories and these ideas. But now, we've seen something called dark participation on the web, which I'm sure you've been accustomed to as well, where journalists talk about something and it doesn't match the worldview of some of the audience, and they will go into the comment section and attack. And that becomes their goal, right? It becomes a community of people who articulate the same worldview, and it becomes expected behavior. But many of those individuals have moved over, and they are on alternative news or on social media and alternative, I'm going to put in quotes here, news sites and platforms where they are interpreting the news through their world lens or through their conspiratorial lens. There is such a distrust with legacy media that even if the CBC or any legacy media newspaper or radio station or television would say something, it's not going to be listened to by this group because they are distrusted. Some of these messages actually have to go to some of these other platforms. Now, this idea of all of the media coming together is entertaining because if we think about even the idea of the Illuminati since 1776, no one has said anything about their plans or what they were doing. No one can keep a secret. I don't even know if you tried to plan a surprise party. People can't keep a secret. They're going to tell. So these ideas that the media are attached and working together to spread this narrative to against COVID or whatever the next crisis may be is really a way to say that I'm articulating my distrust in what not just the media are saying, but all the institutions are saying. And so now I'm going to trust this other individual on social media or someone who's an influencer on social media to interpret the news or world event happenings for me because they reflect my worldviews, my distrust, and my disenfranchisement.
Right.
So these ideas are tough, but they're out there, and we need to learn how to engage with it.
We need more time, but we're going to be doing another show on Tuesday about Romana Didulo. I think I'm saying that right, the self-proclaimed Queen of Canada, who's still in a small community here in Saskatchewan, and just has really divided that community. Do either of you have 10 seconds to thoughts to share on the role of Romana and how deeply entrenched that her thoughts and her message is in Saskatchewan?
Go ahead.
No, you take it away, Carmen.
a colleague and I at Queen's just wrote an article recently about her last 6 months about her use of religion and what she's doing. She came from QAnon. She was one of the QAnon influencers. And when Q actually went silent, many of the influencers pushed these narratives. Romana actually worked very hard to provide food banks and farmer equipment and hay and feed.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have to continue
need.
this on Tuesday. I'm literally being played off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Great show. Have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you.